In this lesson, we're going to be looking at how we write a number in three different forms, okay, in our base 10 system of numeration. Now, the first form that we have here is the expanded form. All right, that's number one. And by comparison, the expanded form is really this form here that we have under the form that we have written in words. So for example, we have 1 times 1 in the tens column, and then as I'm in the units column rather, and as I move to my left, I have 1 times 10, then I have 1 times 100, then I have 1 times 1,000, then I have 1 times 10,000, and so on and so forth. This form is called the expanded form. So let's look at how we write numbers in these three different forms. The other two forms, number two is the exponential form, okay? And by exponent, I mean that the base 10 is raised to a power. For example, in the second row, I have in the units column, I would have 10 to the 0. Then as I move to the tens column, I would have 10 to the 1, then 10 to the 2. In the hundreds column, 10 to the 3. In the thousand column, 10 to the 4. In the 10,000 column. So that's the second method or way in which that we are going to write these numbers that I have here. Okay, and this form, as I've said, is called the exponential form. And number three, and not last, is the decimal form, okay, where we have in the units column here, we have in blue 1, then in the tens column we have 10, in the hundreds column we have 100, in the thousand columns we have 1,000, and in the 10,000 column we have 10,000, and we go on so forth. Okay, now let's get into it quickly. First, we're going to be looking at part A. And part A here we have 762.54. So let's look at how we write this number in expanded form, which is the first form here. Okay, if you notice, when a number is written in the expanded form, here it is always times the column that it is in. For example, units mean 1, so we have a 1 times 1. Tens mean, in the tens column we have a 1 times 10. In the hundreds column we have a 1 times 100. So all I'm doing here in the expanded form is that since the 7, if I should write this number, and I'm going to do that for clarity, if I should write 762.54 in my base 10 system of numeration chart that I have here, since I'm dealing with 700, right, then the 7 would go in the hundreds column, and then the next digit is 6, so the 6 would go in the tens column. And if you notice, 2 is to the left, to the immediate left of the decimal point, so I would put 2 in this column. And remember, this vertical red line here means my decimal point. Now if you notice, as I move over my decimal point to my right, I have a 5, so this is 0.5, so I would have a 5 there. And then as I move in my 10th column, the 5 is in my 10th column, and as I move more to my right, the 4 would be in my 100th column. Okay, so here we would have 2 decimal places following the point, because in the first decimal place I would have a 5, and in the second I would have a 4. Now, this number that I've written in my place value chart, we're going to write it in the expanded form. Now here, since 7 is in the hundreds column, if you notice, I have a 1 times 100. So since it's 7 now, I am going to replace the 1 with the 7. So I would have for A, let me change the color a bit. For A, I would have 7 times 100, close bracket, plus, and then my 6 is in the tens column, so I would have 6 times, and it's in the tens, so I'm having 6 times 10, close bracket, and then I have my 2 in my ones column, so that would be plus 2 times 1. Okay, if you notice here, now as I move across my decimal point, I would have a plus, and if you look carefully, you'll see this is 0.5. So if you notice, the 5 is in the tenth column. Okay, so I would replace the 1 with the 5, so I would have a 5 over 10. Okay, and that's plus, and the 4 is in the hundredth column, so I would have a 4 over 100. Okay, that's 4 over 100, and it's that easy. Okay, so let's pull this up a bit and let's look at the second number in part B here and see how we would represent that number as in the expanded form. Okay, let me just pull this up a bit. Let's just pull this up a bit to right there. Okay, yes, and let me just pull this down quickly, and let's look at the second number in part B when how it is written in the expanded form. Now this is pretty easy. Again, if you notice, in part B I have 53,902.7, and really I'm going to write this number in my place value chart again, so that you can see it quite easily. Let me use a black. Now it's 53,000, and let me just pull down my chart a bit so you can make the necessary connections. Okay, now if it's 53,000 I'm speaking of, then it simply means, then if the 2 is close to the point, then I'm going to put my 2 in the units column. Okay, so here I would put my 2 here, then my 0 is in the tens column, so I have to put that in the tens column. Then my 9 is in the hundreds column, so I'm going to put that in the hundreds column. My 3 would be in the thousand column, and my 5 would be in the 10,000 column. Okay, so my 5 would be right there. So here I have written 53,902. Now if you notice, I have a 0.7, and remember the vertical orange line represents my point, so I'm going to put my 7 right there. Okay, so that's a 0.7. Alright, since we have completed that, let's look at how we would write this number in expanded form. Okay, let me just pull this up now a bit. So here, so quickly, let's look at how we write this second number in expanded form. So for part B, let me change the color quickly. So for part B, we would have 5 is in the 10,000 column, so we would have a 5 times, and we're timesing it by the column that it is in, 10,000. So that's 10, 1, 2, 3, 10,000 plus, open bracket, we have a 3 in the 1,000 column, so that would be 3 times 1,000, 1, 2, plus we have a 9 in the hundreds column, so that would be a 9 times 100. Okay, plus, and then we have the 0 in the tens column, so you could say, for place value sake, you could say 0 times 10. Alright, and then we have a 2 in the units column, so we could simply say this is plus 2 times 1. Okay, and that's in the units column. And then as we go across the decimal point, we would have a 7 in the 10th column, so I would have a 7 over, oops, sorry, let me write that properly. We would have a 7 over 10, so this is 7 over 10. Okay, and that's it. Now for the second, and for the third, rather, part C, quickly again, we could just write this in the place value system chart, and in this now we have 4,150. So here I could say this is my, since the 0 is right next to the decimal point, I'm going to place it beside my line here, so I'm going to say this is 0, and then I would have a 5 in the tens column, I would have a 1 in the hundreds column, and I would have a 4 in the 1,000 column. Across my decimal point now, I would have in my 10th column I would have an 8, in my 100th column I would have a 3, in my 1,000 column I would have a 6. Okay, good. So again, for part C, I'm just going to simply rewrite this information as is. So for part C, my 4 is in my 1000 column, so here I would have a 4 times 1000, 1, 2, 3, plus I would have in my 100th column 1 times 100, so I would have 1 times 100, plus in my tens column I would have 5 times 10, and in my units column I would have plus 0 times 1, because 1 means unit. Now as I go across my decimal point, now I have a 8 in my 10th column, so I would have 8 over 10, and that is being added to 3 over 100, because that's in my 100th column, plus I would have a 6 over 1000. Okay, so that's basically how you write a number in expanded form. In the other videos, we'll be looking at how we write a number in exponential form. Okay, bye bye.